Kidnapped boy utters only one phrase. Michael Jordan will find me. 48 hours later, something inexplicable occurs. The dank basement reeked of mold and despair. 9-year-old Zion was shackled to a rusty pipe, yet his large expressive eyes betrayed no fear. Elijah descended the creaking stairs, each step echoing like a hammer blow in the pervasive silence. 4 decades of harsh existence had etched themselves onto his unkempt, bearded face. His grimy shirt hung loosely on his gaunt frame, and his calloused hands evinced a slight tremor. Not from nervousness, but from suppressed rage. "What's on your mind, boy?" "You're not getting out of here," Zion replied. "Michael Jordan will find me." Elijah let out a derisive laugh. "Listen here, clever boy. That man doesn't even know you exist. He's in his mansion, counting his money while you're here, shackled in this hole." Elijah drew closer, crouching before Zion. His sour breath wafted into the child's face. "Your father's a school bus driver. Your home barely has paint on its walls. Why in God's name would Michael Jordan waste his time looking for you?" Zion closed his eyes for a moment. When he reopened them, an uncanny calm settled over the room. "Because God will show him where I am." Elijah sprang to his feet and retrieved a grimy old cell phone, beginning to type a message. "I have your son. I want $500,000. You have 48 hours. Upon receiving the message, David tore through the streets of Southside Chicago as if his very existence hung in the balance, and indeed it did. His legs burned, yet he could not cease. His blue school bus driver's uniform was drenched in sweat, and his heart pounded so fiercely he could hear it reverberating in his ears. The 7th District Police Station loomed ahead like a beacon of hope. David careened through the glass doors, nearly knocking over an officer who was exiting. "My son has been abducted," he bellowed, directly addressing the front desk. "Someone took him. He's only 9 years old." Detective Harris looked up from the papers she was scrutinizing. A 45-year-old black woman, her graying hair pulled back into a tight bun, she possessed the weary gaze of someone who had witnessed too much. But something in David's desperate plea compelled her to rise from her chair. "Calm down, sir," she said, approaching him. "Let's talk. What's your name?" "David Williams." "My son, Zion? He didn't come home from school yesterday. I received this message this morning." "He's been abducted," Harris observed the man before her. David was tall and slender, with weary eyes that told the story of a man single-handedly raising a child. "They're demanding $500,000, David said, handing over his phone. "I don't have that kind of money. I'm a school bus driver. How am I supposed to get $500,000? Harris took the phone, scrutinizing every detail. The writing appeared amateurish, yet it was no less menacing. "Mr. Williams, I'm going to be frank with you," she said, meeting his gaze. "Without concrete leads, without witnesses, these cases go cold within hours. We have 48 hours to find your son, and every minute counts." David felt his world collapsing around him. He leaned against the counter, battling a wave of dizziness. "Is there anything I can do? Anything at all?" Harris hesitated. She knew the chances were slim, but looking at the desperate father, she couldn't entirely extinguish his hope. "Let's begin immediately. I need information on Zion's routine, his friends, school, anything that could give us a lead." 20 minutes later, David emerged from the police station with a potent mix of hope and despair. His legs automatically carried him to the First National Bank on the corner. If the police couldn't find Zion in time, he would need the money. The manager, a middle-aged Caucasian man with gold-rimmed glasses, barely glanced up from his computer screen as David approached the counter. "I need an urgent loan," David said, his voice cracking. $500,000. It's a matter of life or death." The manager typed a few keys, his face contorting into an expression of utter disdain. "Mr. Williams, I see here that your credit is in the red. You have overdue debts, a low credit score. Application denied. We couldn't even approve $10,000. David felt his knees buckle. He clutched the cold marble counter. "Please, my son has been abducted. I need this money to save him." "I'm sorry, but there's nothing I can do," the manager said, already beckoning the next customer. "Security!" David was escorted out of the bank, feeling the ground vanish beneath his feet. "How am I going to save my son?" he cried, his voice breaking. Meanwhile, the silence in the basement was broken only by the steady drip of a leaking pipe somewhere in the shadows. Zion hadn't moved from the position where Elijah had left him, but his lips were moving in a silent prayer. Elijah descended the stairs again, this time carrying a plate of food, dry bread and water in a cracked plastic cup. He placed the food within the boy's reach and sat on an old wooden crate, observing him with morbid curiosity. "You're not scared," Elijah said, more as an observation than a question. "Most children would be crying, screaming for help." Zion picked up a piece of bread and chewed slowly, as if carefully considering his words. "Fear won't help me," he replied. "Michael Jordan always said that fear is what prevents people from achieving greatness." Elijah tilted his head, intrigued despite himself. "What do you mean? Do you know Michael Jordan personally?" Zion shook his head, a small smile touching his lips for the first time since he had been brought there. "My father and I watched a documentary about him last month. The Last Dance. Michael Jordan grew up poor like me. He was just a black kid from a humble family, but he never gave up believing he could be great." "That's just a movie, kid. Real life is different." "It's not just a movie." Zion lifted his eyes, and there was something there that made Elijah uncomfortable. "It's about never giving up." Michael Jordan was cut from his high school basketball team. They said he wasn't good enough, but he kept trying. He won when everyone doubted him. Zion stopped eating and looked directly at Elijah. "That's why I know he's going to find me. Because God uses people who don't give up to perform miracles." Elijah laughed, but there was less conviction this time. "Your father drives a school bus, doesn't he?" he asked, changing the subject. Zion stopped chewing. His eyes narrowed slightly. "How do you know where my father works?" Elijah smiled, a cruel smile that didn't reach his eyes. "I know a lot about you, Zion. I know your mother died when you were 5. I know you live in that small apartment on Ashland Avenue." Zion swallowed the bread, but his expression didn't change. "You might know where I live, but you don't know who I am," he said calmly. "And you definitely don't know what I believe in." Elijah stood up abruptly, unnerved by the boy's unwavering calm. "Believe what you want, kid. Ultimately, you're here, and Michael Jordan's there. And tomorrow, if your father doesn't bring my money—" He didn't finish the sentence, but the threat hung in the air like toxic smoke. Zion closed his eyes again. "Michael Jordan will find me," he repeated as if it were a mantra. "God has already shown him the way." Meanwhile, the precinct's investigation room was bathed in the blue glow of the monitors. Detective Harris had red eyes from poring over the security footage from the last 48 hours. Stacks of printed photos covered her desk, alongside cold coffee cups and untouched sandwich remnants. "Here," she murmured, freezing an image on the screen. A blue 2010 Chevrolet Malibu parked at the terminus of David's bus line. Her partner, Detective Rodriguez, approached from behind her chair. "How long was it parked there?" 3 hours, Harris pointed to the timestamp on the screen. "From 2 in the afternoon until 5, precisely when Zion's bus would pass by on his way home from school." Rodriguez picked up a magnifying glass, examining the car's license plate in the grainy image. "Can you make out the plate?" "Partially. It starts with BN, but the rest is obscured by the tree's shadow." Harris moved to the next image in the sequence. The car was still there, but now there was a blurred figure moving near the rear of the vehicle. "Wait," she zoomed in on the image. "There's someone here. Male, white, between 30 and 50 years old, disheveled appearance. Is that our guy?" "It has to be. But here's where it gets strange," she advanced to the next image. "Look at this." In the subsequent image, Zion appeared walking along the sidewalk, backpack on his back, precisely as he would every day. But in the very next image, just 3 seconds later, he had vanished completely. "This doesn't make sense," Rodriguez frowned. "A child doesn't just disappear like that. No footprints, no sign of a struggle, no noise picked up by the security microphones." Harris rewound the image and replayed it, frame by frame. Zion was there, and then he wasn't. "It's as if he had been swallowed by the earth," she murmured. Rodriguez continued studying the security footage. "Detective, take a look at this." He pointed to a new sequence. "Pawn shop camera 2 blocks away. The same car. An hour later." Harris leaned in to look. The blue Chevrolet was parked in front of a store named Gold Rush Pawn Shop. A man was exiting the premises, his face obscured by a baseball cap. "Let's swing by this pawn shop," Harris said, grabbing his car keys. "Maybe someone there will remember him." 20 minutes later, they were in the dusty shop, conversing with the proprietor, an elderly man with thick spectacles. "Oh, yes, I remember him," the man said, nodding his head. "Odd fellow. Wanted to sell a Bulls t-shirt. A child size, small. It still had the tag on it." Harris and Rodriguez exchanged tense glances. "Did he sell the t-shirt?" Number one offered him $20, but he said it wasn't enough. He stormed out cursing, saying the whole world was against him. "Anything else you recall?" The man scratched his grizzled beard. "He smelled of engine oil, you know, like a mechanic, and his hands were heavily soiled with grease." Harris felt a jolt of adrenaline, the first real lead. "Thank you. If he comes back, call us immediately." As they left the shop, Rodriguez was typing furiously on his tablet. "Unemployed mechanics with criminal records in the vicinity," he murmured. "Suspect list with a blue Chevrolet Malibu registered to their name." Harris stopped mid-stride on the sidewalk when his phone rang again. It was the police. "Detective? We analyzed the cell phone message and we got a name. Elijah Morrison, 42 years old. Arrested twice for auto parts theft. Registered address, 1247 Industrial Boulevard. Abandoned warehouse. We're on our way." Harris hung up and looked at Rodriguez. "We've got our man, but we still have a problem. 24 hours have passed, and we don't know if the boy is still alive." At that very instant, the digital clock in David's tiny kitchen marked exactly 24 hours since Zion's disappearance. David was sitting at the scratched Formica table, staring fixedly at a framed photo of Zion smiling, wearing a Chicago Bulls t-shirt. His hands trembled as he clutched a cup of cold coffee. He hadn't slept a wink since receiving the kidnapper's call. His eyes were red and swollen, and his unshaven face made him look 10 years older. The apartment was too silent. Normally at this hour, Zion would be doing homework in the living room, or perhaps watching cartoons. The silence was deafening. David picked up Zion's photo and clutched it to his chest. "Where are you, God?" he whispered, his voice breaking. "Where are you when I need you most? My wife is already gone. You can't take my son, too." Tears began to stream down his face. The full weight of the past 4 years as a single father crashed down on him like an avalanche. Working 2 jobs to make ends meet, trying to be both a mother and a father, battling a system that seemed intent on keeping them in poverty. "I failed him," David murmured to the photo. "I should have gotten home earlier. I should have picked him up from school. I should have protected my boy better." His phone rang, making him jump. It was Detective Harris. "Mr. Williams, we have a lead. We've identified a suspect. We're heading to check an address now." David stood up so quickly he knocked over his chair. "Did you find him? Is Zion okay?" "We don't know yet, but we're getting close. I need you to stay home in case the kidnapper tries to make contact again." "I want to come with you. He's my son." "Mr. Williams, I understand your desperation, but this could be dangerous. If it's really our guy, we don't know how he might react." David clenched his free fist, fighting the urge to bolt out the door. "Please, detective, bring my boy back. He's all I have left." After hanging up, David knelt on the living room floor, still clutching Zion's photo. His words emerged as a desperate whisper. "If you exist, God, if you're listening, please, don't let me lose my son. He still has a whole life ahead of him. He has dreams, he has faith. He believes in miracles." David paused, recalling a conversation he'd had with Zion a few weeks prior. The boy had asked why God allows bad things to happen to good people. "Sometimes, Dad," Zion had said, with that peculiar wisdom children sometimes possess, "I think God puts us in difficult situations to show that he can do impossible things." 20 minutes later, Detective Harris called again. "Mr. Williams, we found evidence at the abandoned workshop. A Bulls t-shirt, signs that someone had been there recently, but the place is empty. They've moved on." David's heart sank. "Does that mean you've lost the lead?" "Number, it means we're close. Very close. We're going to find your son, Mr. Williams. 24 hours isn't 48 yet. We still have time." As soon as Harris hung up, she cast a grim look at Rodriguez. In her extensive experience, the odds of locating a kidnapping victim alive diminished precipitously after 24 hours, dwindling further with each passing moment. Reaching into her jacket pocket, she felt the bull's t-shirt they had recovered from the derelict workshop. It was small, child-sized, with a jagged tear in the sleeve, as though it had been violently ripped away. "Where are you, Zion?" she murmured under her breath. "And I pray you're still alive to hear your father call your name." Meanwhile, Zion sat huddled on the frigid floor of the new hideout, a basement even more tenebrous and dank than the last. Elijah had grown increasingly agitated and aggressive since their relocation, constantly scrutinizing the windows and flinching at every slightest sound. "Stop just standing there, brooding," Elijah snarled, descending the stairs with a bottle of water and another meager piece of stale bread. "You're making me edgy." But Zion wasn't merely thinking, he was reminiscing. 3 weeks prior, on a Friday evening, he and his father had cozied up on the modest living room sofa to watch The Last Dance on Netflix. David had worked a double shift and was utterly exhausted, yet Zion had implored him to watch it together. "Dad, check this out," Zion had exclaimed, pointing at the screen as Michael Jordan appeared, recounting his childhood. "He grew up in a humble family, just like us." David had smiled, drawing his arm around his son. "That's true, son. But what truly set Michael Jordan apart wasn't his origins. It was the destination he resolved to reach." On screen, Michael Jordan was saying, "It doesn't matter where you come from. It's where you want to go that defines who you are." Zion had fallen silent for a moment, absorbing those words. "Dad, do you think God has a purpose for every individual?" David had hesitated. Since his wife's passing, his own faith had been tested in ways he had never conceived possible. "Why do you ask, son?" "Because Michael Jordan was cut from his high school team. Everyone dismissed him as worthless, but then he became the greatest basketball player of all time. Perhaps God orchestrates difficulties first to demonstrate his ability to perform miracles." Now, sitting in that dark basement, Zion clung to that memory like an anchor. He closed his eyes and could almost feel his father's arm around his shoulders, could almost hear Michael Jordan's voice echoing through the room. "Hey!" Elijah lightly kicked Zion's foot. "I told you to stop daydreaming." Zion opened his eyes and looked directly at his captor. "Have you ever had a dream, Elijah?" The question caught Elijah off guard. He paused mid-motion, the water bottle still in his hand. "What?" "A dream. Something you've always wanted to be or do." Elijah set the bottle down with more force than necessary. "I'm not interested in your mind games, boy." "It's not a game," Zion said calmly. "It's just a question." For a moment, something flickered across Elijah's face, a shadow of vulnerability that was quickly replaced by anger. "Shut up and eat your food." But Zion continued speaking, his voice soft yet persistent. "Michael Jordan faced numerous rejections. People said he would never amount to anything, but he persevered because he knew God had a greater plan." "Your Michael Jordan isn't going to save you," Elijah exploded. "No one is going to save you. Do you think the world cares about a poor black kid from the South Side? Do you think anyone out there is losing sleep over you?" Zion picked up a piece of bread and chewed slowly before responding. "My father does, and God does, and Michael Jordan. He'll feel compelled to help me. I don't know how, but he will." Elijah scoffed, but there was something strained about the sound. "You're living in a fantasy, kid." "Perhaps," Zion shrugged, "but fantasy is just another name for faith, and faith is what makes the impossible possible." Minutes later, mere yards away, at a five-star hotel in downtown Chicago, Michael Jordan was putting the finishing touches on his attire for a charity event. His black tuxedo was impeccable, his bow tie perfectly adjusted. At 61, he still commanded the bearing and presence that had forged his legend. His personal assistant, James, was meticulously organizing the schedule on his tablet. "The event begins at 8, Mr. Jordan. Speech at 9, auction at 10. The car will be here in 15 minutes. Michael adjusted his shirt cuffs and nodded, but an unease lingered in his expression. Throughout the day, he had been plagued by a peculiar sensation, as if something was amiss, as though someone needed help. "James, cancel the car. I'll walk." James looked up from his tablet, surprised. "Sir?" It's quite a distance to the Palmer House Hotel, and it's starting to get chilly. I need some fresh air. It's been a strange day. Michael donned his overcoat and exited the room, leaving James to swiftly recoordinate the transport arrangements. The Chicago night was clear and crisp. Michael began his walk through the familiar streets, but instead of following the direct route downtown, he found himself veering south, towards the neighborhoods where he had grown up. It wasn't a conscious decision. His feet simply carried him in that direction, as if guided by an unseen force. As he walked, memories of his own childhood began to surface. He recalled being cut from his high school basketball team, the humiliation, the sting of rejection. He remembered nights spent praying, imploring God for a chance to prove his worth. "It doesn't matter where you're from," he murmured to himself, reiterating words he'd uttered countless times over the years. "It's where you want to go that defines who you are." He paused at a street corner, realizing he had walked considerably farther than intended. He was now in an industrial area where derelict warehouses cast long shadows under the streetlights. Was this where he was meant to be? Why? Michael surveyed his surroundings, attempting to decipher the impulse that had drawn him there. It was then that his gaze settled on a dilapidated house across the street. Its windows boarded up, its garden overgrown with weeds, presenting an utterly derelict appearance. But there was something about that house, something that made the hairs on his arms prickle. He slowly traversed the street, his leather shoes echoing on the silent pavement. The closer he drew to the house, the stronger the premonition that something was amiss. Terribly amiss. Michael stopped in front of the front door. The paint was flaking, and a rusted padlock adorned the main door. Yet he could have sworn he'd heard something, a muffled sound emanating from below. He pressed his ear against the door. Silence. But then, so faint he almost missed it, came a sound that quickened his pulse. A child's voice humming softly a tune he recognized. The Chicago Bulls anthem. Michael recoiled from the door, his heart pounding. There was someone inside. A child. He circled the house, seeking another point of entry. At the rear, he discovered a side door with a loose padlock. His hands trembled slightly as he pushed it. The door yielded with a low creak. "Someone here is afraid," he whispered to himself, unsure why he'd uttered the words, yet feeling their truth resonate within his bones. He was on the verge of entering when he heard approaching footsteps on the street. Michael concealed himself behind a shrub and observed a disheveled white man approaching the house nervously. It was Elijah returning from a quick dash to the convenience store for more provisions. He surveyed his surroundings with paranoia before unlocking the front door with a key. Michael waited until Elijah had entered, then quietly approached the side door. He took a deep breath, bracing himself for an act he never thought he'd commit. He rapped on the front door. The sound of the knock reverberated through the house like a cannon shot. In the basement, Zion lifted his head, his eyes igniting with a mixture of hope and absolute certainty. Elijah froze mid-staircase, a soda can in hand. The blood drained from his face. "Who the hell?" he whispered, tiptoeing up the stairs. Another rap, firmer this time. Elijah approached the door, his heart thumping so loudly he could hear it in his ears. He peered through the peephole, but the streetlight was dim, and he could only discern the silhouette of a tall, well-dressed man. "Can I help you?" Elijah inquired through the door, striving to keep his voice steady. "Pardon the intrusion," came the reply from the other side. The voice was deep, calm, yet there was an undertone that sent a shiver down Elijah's spine. "I noticed a light on. I seem to be somewhat lost." Elijah hesitated. It could be anyone. A homeless person, someone seeking drugs, an undercover officer, or it could just be someone genuinely lost. "I can't help," he said. "I'm busy." "I just need to use your phone for a minute," the voice continued, patient yet persistent. "My cell phone died, and I need to call a cab." In the basement, Zion had edged as close as his chains allowed to the base of the stairs. He could hear the muffled voices above, and something in his chest ignited like a flame. "It's him," Zion whispered to himself. "I knew he would come." Upstairs, Elijah was waging an internal battle. Every survival instinct screamed at him to send the stranger away. But what if it was truly just someone needing help? And what if he appeared overly suspicious? Look, man, Elijah said, his voice tightening. This isn't a good time. There's a gas station 3 blocks from here. Michael, on the other side of the door, closed his eyes for a moment. He could feel the fear radiating through the wood. And more than that, he could sense something else. Desperation and a frightened child. I understand, Michael said calmly, but I think I can help you. Elijah frowned. What do you mean? You seem to be going through a difficult time. We all do. Sometimes we just need someone who understands. There was something in the stranger's voice that struck a chord with Elijah. It wasn't judgment. It wasn't superiority. It was genuine compassion. Elijah leaned his forehead against the door. You don't know me, man. You don't know what I'm going through. Perhaps not. But I know what it's like to feel as though the world has turned its back on you. I know what it's like to believe there's no way out. The words hit Elijah like a punch to the gut. How could this stranger know exactly what he was feeling? Who are you? Elijah asked, his voice barely a whisper. Michael looked at the door, weighing his words carefully. Someone who has been where you are now. Someone who knows there's always a better choice, no matter how desperate the situation seems. Elijah felt tears burning his eyes. When was the last time anyone had spoken to him with such kindness? When was the last time anyone had tried to understand him instead of merely judging him? His hand moved slowly toward the doorknob. I've done terrible things, he said, his voice cracking. We all have. But it's not too late to do the right thing. Elijah's hand trembled on the doorknob. In the basement, Zion was praying silently, his lips moving with words only God could hear. Elijah began to turn the knob, but then he stopped. No, he said, his voice hardening again. I can't. It's too late for me. He pulled back from the door, but hesitated. For the first time since this madness had begun, he was feeling something he hadn't felt in years. Hope. Michael, on the other side of the door, sensed the hesitation. He knew there was only a moment, a window of opportunity that would close if he didn't act. There's a child in there, he said calmly. A child who believes in miracles, who believes people can change, who believes you can choose to be better than you think you are. Elijah gasped, staggering back from the door as if he'd been shot. How did he know? Meanwhile, in the dark basement, Zion was on his knees on the cold floor, his small hands clasped in prayer. The chains around his wrists clinked softly as he swayed slightly back and forth. Now, God, he whispered, his words barely audible. Now is the time. I know you brought him here. Show him what to do. Upstairs, Elijah was leaning against the door, breathing heavily. Sweat streamed down his face despite the cold night. How do you know? He cried through the door, his voice breaking. How could you know about the boy? Michael closed his eyes, searching for the right words. He didn't know how to explain the force that had brought him there, the inexplicable impulse that had guided him through the streets of Chicago to this specific house. Because he called to me, Michael said simply. Somehow he called to me. Elijah laughed, but it was a humorless sound, laden with despair. That's madness. You're insane, man. Perhaps, Michael conceded, but I'm here. And you know why? Because that boy downstairs has a faith that moves mountains. He believes people can be saved, including you. Zion, hearing the muffled voices upstairs, smiled through his tears. He knew his prayers were being answered, that the miracle he had hoped for was unfolding directly above him. Elijah slumped down the door until he was sitting on the floor, his head in his hands. I didn't want it to come to this, he murmured. I lost my job, my home, everything. I couldn't see any other way out. There's always another way out, Michael said, his voice soft yet resolute. Always. You don't understand. They'll arrest me. They'll throw me in prison for the rest of my life. Perhaps, but at least you'll be able to look yourself in the mirror again. At least you'll sleep at night knowing you did the right thing when it mattered. Elijah heard Zion's footsteps downstairs, the faint rasp of chains dragging across the concrete floor. That sound had haunted him for 2 days, the sound of an innocent child paying for his sins. He kept saying you were coming, Elijah said, his voice barely a whisper. "From the very first minute, Michael Jordan is going to find me." How could he have known? A shiver ran down Michael's spine. How did he know my name? He's your fan. Obsessed. He and his father watched that documentary about you. The boy, he talks about you as if you were a hero. Michael closed his eyes, recalling all the children he had met over the years, all the young fans who saw him as something greater than he truly was. "Then be his hero," Michael said. "Be the man he believes you can be." Elijah lifted his head, looking at the door as if he could see through it. "How?" "By opening this door, by letting me in, by doing the right thing." Zion in the basement stopped praying and looked directly at the ceiling, as if he could see through the concrete and wood to the heart of his captor. "You knew he was coming, didn't you?" Elijah said, descending the stairs. His voice was different now, softer, more human. Zion smiled, an expression of absolute peace on his young face. "It is written," he said calmly. "The Lord straightens the paths of those who trust in him. You just didn't believe." Elijah stopped on the last step, looking at the boy he had held captive. For 2 days he had seen Zion as merely a means to an end, a way to get money. But now, seeing the unwavering faith in the child's eyes, he found himself confronted with his own soul. "How can you forgive me?" Elijah asked, tears streaming down his face. "After everything I've done to you?" Zion tilted his head, studying his captor with a compassion that shouldn't exist in a 9-year-old child. "Because Jesus taught me to forgive, and because I know you're not a bad person. You're just a wounded person who made bad choices." Upstairs, Michael heard the jingle of keys and footsteps descending the stairs. His heart raced. "What's happening down there?" "I'm doing the right thing," Elijah shouted back. Finally. The street was shrouded in an unsettling quietude. Michael Jordan remained motionless before the peeling wooden door, every fiber of his being thrumming with an inexplicable tension. He was 63 years old, but he had never felt anything like it before. It wasn't merely intuition. It was something deeper, more urgent, as if the universe were whispering in his ear, guiding him to this precise moment in time. The first 3 minutes after Elijah went downstairs stretched into an eternity. Michael pressed his ear to the door, his breathing controlled, all his senses honed. He had learned to trust his instincts through years of competition, when to attack, when to retreat, when to stake everything on a single gambit. And now, standing on that cracked sidewalk, his instincts screamed a single word: danger. Michael closed his eyes and allowed his memories to transport him back. Wilmington, North Carolina, 1975. He was 12 years old, walking home after basketball practice, when he heard screams emanating from an abandoned house. His parents had always told him not to get involved in other people's troubles, but something within him, the same force he felt now, compelled him to investigate. He found a 7-year-old girl trapped in a basement, abandoned by older teenagers who thought it funny to lock her in there. Her desperate cries echoed in his mind to this very day. It was the first time Michael understood the true meaning of heroism. It isn't about being the strongest or the fastest. It's about being present when someone needs you. The sound came first as a distant murmur, metal against metal, chains being manipulated, muffled voices that coalesced into a symphony of despair that only he seemed able to hear. Michael concentrated, filtering out the street noises, distant cars, the wind whistling through electrical wires, a dog barking 3 houses down. But beneath it all, there was something more, something that made his heart quicken. Heavy breathing, someone crying, and then, almost inaudible, a young voice whispering, "Please, God, please make him come. Make Michael Jordan find me." Michael felt every hair on his body stand on end. It was impossible. There was no way he could be hearing this through a closed door, with walls and possibly a basement separating him from the source of the sound. But he was hearing it, as clearly as if he were standing right beside the person speaking. "Elijah," he called, rapping lightly on the door with his knuckles. "Is everything all right in there?" Silence, a silence that weighed like lead in the night air. But Michael could sense movement on the other side. Panic, despair, fear. On the other side of the door, In the subterranean world of that damp basement, a transformation was taking place. Elijah knelt beside Zion, his hands trembling uncontrollably as he grappled with the rusty bunch of keys. Each key he tried seemed to conspire against him, refusing to fit into the lock of the handcuffs that bound the boy's slender wrist. Come on, he muttered to himself, sweat trickling down his forehead despite the damp chill of the basement. The sound of someone knocking at the door reverberated up the stairs, striking him like a bolt of lightning. Michael Jordan. He was really up there. This couldn't be happening. It was impossible. Coincidences like this didn't exist in the real world. But the voice that had responded was unmistakable. Elijah had watched hundreds of interviews, documentaries, games. He knew that voice better than his own. Tears began to stream down his face, mingling with the sweat. It was as if all the emotions he had suppressed during years of hardship were erupting simultaneously. Every no he had received, every door slammed in his face, every disdainful glance he had endured, all culminated in this moment. "I'm sorry, Zion," he whispered incessantly, his voice fractured by emotion. I'm sorry. I'm sorry." Zion observed the man who had abducted him with a serenity that defied his tender age. His large, expressive eyes showed no fear, but rather a compassion that Elijah could not fathom. It was as if the boy perceived something within him that Elijah himself had long since lost. "You don't need to apologize," Zion said softly. "You're not a bad person. You're just lost." Elijah ceased fumbling with the keys, raising his eyes to meet the boy's calm gaze. How could a 9-year-old possess such wisdom? How could he look at him, someone who had abducted him, held him captive, and still find humanity? "How can you say that?" he rasped, his voice hoarse. "I abducted you. I kept you here. I am a monster." Zion shook his head slowly, and Elijah saw tears welling up in the boy's eyes. But they were not tears of fear or anger. They were tears of genuine compassion. "My father always told me that everyone has light within them," Zion replied, his voice soft yet firm. "Sometimes the darkness grows so immense that we forget the light is there, but it never completely vanishes. God never gives up on us." The boy's words struck Elijah like a blow to the gut. He recalled his own childhood when his mother had uttered similar sentiments, before drugs claimed her, before the world devolved into such a cruel and unforgiving place, before he lost all faith in goodness. "I used to be different," Elijah admitted, resuming his attempt with the keys with renewed determination now. "I used to believe in the inherent good. I used to believe in God." "You still can," Zion replied, his voice imbued with a faith that seemed impossible given the circumstances. "It's not too late. God is still present. He brought Michael Jordan to you. This is no mere coincidence." Elijah felt a shiver trace its way down his spine. The boy was correct. What other explanations could account for Jordan's appearance precisely here, precisely now, on a street that wasn't even en route to any significant destination? In the basement, at last, one of the keys turned in the lock. The click of metal disengaging reverberated through the space like a peal of liberty. Elijah watched the handcuff fall from Zion's wrist, leaving a crimson welt on the boy's dark skin. "There," Elijah murmured, his hands still trembling. "You are free." Zion rubbed his wrist, yet made no move to flee. Instead, he did something that utterly astonished Elijah. He placed his small hand atop Elijah's, offering solace to the one who had been his captor. "Now you too are free," he stated, his eyes gleaming with a wisdom that transcended his 9 years. "You made the right choice. You chose the light." Elijah gazed at their joined hands, his own large, calloused hand enveloped by Zion's small, soft one. For a moment he glimpsed the man he could have been, the man he still could become. "I am unworthy of forgiveness," he whispered. "Everyone is deserving of forgiveness," Zion countered. "That is what my father instilled in me. That is what God imparts. You merely need to forgive yourself as well." It was at that precise moment that the sound reached them. Faint at first, it rapidly swelled in intensity. Sirens. Multiple sirens rending the night silence like keen blades. Elijah's blood ran cold. Every one of his survival instincts, honed by years of existing on the fringes of society, snapped into high alert. He sprang to his feet, panic instantly supplanting the fleeting tranquility. "They've found me," he whispered, his eyes wide with alarm. "The police have located me. They'll apprehend me. They'll incarcerate me indefinitely." Zion, too, rose, but without any discernible haste. He possessed a composure that starkly contrasted with Elijah's despair, a serenity seemingly stemming from a profound wellspring of unshakable faith. "It's all right," Zion reassured, positioning himself between Elijah and the stairs. "You did the right thing. Mr. Jordan is here. The police are on their way. Everything is concluding as it should." But Elijah couldn't register the logic in the boy's words. His mind was being consumed by panic, by the searing memories of every time he'd been caught, every instance he'd been crushed by the system. Incarceration meant the end. It meant he would never again have another chance to start anew. "No, no, no," he whimpered, scrambling towards the stairs. "I can't go to jail. I can't end up like this." Upstairs, Michael also caught the wail of sirens. They were approaching rapidly, likely less than 2 blocks away. He could discern their nature from the sound. At least 3 patrol cars, perhaps an ambulance. Someone had summoned the police. He was faced with a life-altering decision: to await the police and let the professionals handle the situation, or to act immediately. His experience as a professional athlete had instilled in him that sometimes one is presented with only a fleeting window of opportunity, a moment where action is imperative, regardless of the risk. Life's pivotal moments do not linger for one to be fully prepared. It was then he heard it, a shriek emanating from inside the house. It was no adult's cry. It was high-pitched, youthful, desperate. "Help! Mr. Jordan, help me!" The sound sliced through Michael like a heated blade. In that instant, he was no longer on the sidewalk of a dilapidated house on the outskirts of Chicago. He was transported back to the basketball courts of his youth, where he had learned that heroes are forged not by titles or trophies, but by moments of sheer courage when it matters most. He recalled his own words from an interview years prior. "I've failed over and over and over again in my life, and that is why I succeed. Because when it counts, when it truly counts, you cannot be afraid to fail." Michael did not falter. He took 2 steps back, planted his right foot firmly on the concrete, and charged at the door with the full might of his still powerful, athletic physique. The impact was devastating. The aged wooden door offered no resistance whatsoever to the 220 pounds of Michael Jordan in motion. She burst inward with a resounding crash that reverberated throughout the house, the ancient hinges splintering and wood shrapneling in every direction. Michael stormed through the entrance, his eyes rapidly adjusting to the gloom. Decades of experience in packed arenas had honed his vision to swiftly adapt to fluctuating light conditions. He could hear commotion in the basement, scurrying footsteps, shrill shouts, the thud of someone stumbling. "Boy!" he bellowed, his voice reverberating through the hollow walls with the commanding authority of one accustomed to leadership. "Where are you?" "Down here," came the immediate crystal-clear reply, imbued with unadulterated relief. "Mr. Jordan, I'm here. I knew you'd come." Michael bolted toward the basement stairs, taking 3 steps at a time. His long, still agile legs propelled him downwards in a matter of seconds. What he saw at the bottom made him pause for a moment, not out of fear, but of sheer awe. Zion was propped against the damp brick wall, visibly terrified yet seemingly unharmed. His large eyes gleamed with a commingling of terror and utter relief. But what struck Michael most was the boy's stance. He was shielding someone. Even after hours in captivity, despite being merely 9 years old, he was attempting to shield his captor. Across the room, Elijah was pressed against a high-set window, his hands frantically searching for a latch, an egress, anything that might signify escape. But his movements were sluggish, hesitant, as if a part of him didn't truly wish to flee. The air in the basement was laden with the scent of mildew and despair, but also with something more. Hope, a palpable hope that seemed to emanate from Zion himself. Rusty chains lay on the floor, alongside open shackles. There was evidence that someone had been confined there, but also evidence of liberation. The shackles hadn't been forced open. They had been carefully unlocked. "It's all right, son," Michael said calmly, approaching Zion with slow, deliberate movements. "You're safe now." Zion looked up at the face of the man who had been his hero for as long as he could remember. Tears of relief began to course down his cheeks, but his smile illuminated the entire basement. "I knew you'd come," he whispered, his voice trembling with sheer emotion. "I prayed to God every day. I told him you wouldn't give up on me. I knew you would arrive." Michael knelt beside the boy, his large, gentle hands meticulously checking for any injuries. His fingers located the crimson mark on Zion's wrist, and he felt a surge of fury intermingle with relief. But as he looked at Elijah, the anger transmuted into something far more intricate: comprehension. The man was not struggling to escape with all his might. He was weeping, his hands clasped over his face in a raw display of profound remorse. "How did you discern?" Michael inquired, his voice gentle yet imbued with genuine curiosity. "What made you so certain of my arrival?" Zion smiled through his tears, and within that smile Michael perceived something that resonated profoundly with him. It was the identical expression he used to see in the mirror as a child, back when he harbored dreams of the impossible and steadfastly refused to concede to limitations. "Because you are Michael Jordan," Zion declared, as if that singular fact elucidated everything. "You are relentless, not when you're facing defeat, nor when all others deem it impossible. I offered a prayer to God, and God in turn knew you would not abandon me either." The words struck Michael with an unexpected profundity. Throughout his illustrious career, he had been characterized by many epithets: competitive, resolute, unyielding. Yet he had never envisioned himself as an instrument of faith, as one whom a child might invoke through supplication. Zion's sobs intensified now, yet they were tears of unadulterated elation. The wail of sirens now permeated the street, and Michael could distinctly hear vehicles screeching to a halt outside, gates clanging shut, heavy footsteps pounding toward the house, authoritative voices slicing through the nocturnal air. "Police!" a voice bellowed from above. "Emerge with your hands raised." Michael glanced at Zion, then at Elijah, who had evidently abandoned any attempt to find an escape. The older man sat slumped on the floor, his head cradled in his hands, convulsed by sobs that seemed to emanate from the profound depths of his very soul. "You saved him," Michael conveyed to Elijah, his voice imbued with a profound compassion that astonished all present, himself included. "Ultimately, you made the righteous choice. You relinquished the restraints. You opted to act virtuously. That will undoubtedly account for something." Elijah lifted his gaze, eyes bloodshot and swollen from tears. For the first time in years, he perceived no judgment in another's regard. He discerned comprehension. He glimpsed the potential for redemption. "Do you truly believe that?" he inquired, his voice faint yet imbued with a fragile hope. "Do you believe I can still attain forgiveness?" "I'm certain," Michael replied, gazing at Zion, who nodded emphatically. "This child has already absolved you, and if a 9-year-old can discern inherent goodness in you after all this, consider what God must perceive." Heavy footsteps resonated down the stairwell. Potent beams of light sliced through the basement's oppressive darkness. Authoritative voices permeated the atmosphere, yet Michael maintained his composure, ever protective. "Hands up! All of you!" Michael rose slowly, positioning himself between Zion and the descending officers. His hands ascended, yet his body served as a protective bulwark around the child. "I am Michael Jordan," he asserted, his voice calm and commanding, imbued with the same unyielding confidence he had deployed to guide teams through pivotal moments. "This child is Zion. He was abducted, but he is unharmed now. The man over there is Elijah. He released the boy prior to your arrival. He ultimately did the right thing." The foremost officer to reach the base of the stairwell was a middle-aged African-American woman, possessing keen eyes and a bearing that evinced years of seasoned experience. Her flashlight meticulously scanned the scene, registering every minute detail: the discarded open handcuffs on the floor, the tears of profound relief streaking Zion's face, Michael's stalwart protective stance, and Elijah's palpable, genuine remorse. "Detective Harris," she announced, identifying herself. "Mr. Jordan, I will require you to step away from the child so we may properly assess the situation." Michael paused momentarily. Decades of ingrained protective instincts clamored for him not to leave Zion unattended for even an instant. He then turned to the boy. "It's all right," he murmured softly, his large hands gently resting on Zion's shoulders. "These individuals are here to assist. You are completely safe now. I will not depart from this location until I am assured of your well-being." Zion nodded, yet his gaze remained unwavering on Michael. "Thank you for coming to find me," he whispered. "Thank you for not relinquishing your hope in me." An overwhelming surge of emotion swelled within Michael's chest. In that pivotal moment, he grasped a profound truth about his life's purpose. It transcended mere basketball, extending beyond victories and defeats. It encompassed moments such as this. It was about embodying the beacon of hope for someone in their greatest hour of need. "I would never abandon you, Zion," he responded, his voice laden with profound emotion. "Never." And in that damp basement, surrounded by officers and the grim evidence of a dire situation that had culminated in the most favorable outcome imaginable, Michael Jordan realized he had just experienced the most pivotal moment of his life. It wasn't on the basketball court. It wasn't before thousands of cheering fans. It was within a dim basement, responding to the heartfelt prayer of a child who had dared to believe in the impossible. And the impossible had indeed come to pass. Harris fully lowered her firearm, speaking into her radio. "We have the victim. The child is secure. I repeat, the child is secure and appears to be unharmed." More officers descended the stairs, followed by paramedics. The confined basement rapidly became congested with uniforms and gear. Elijah slowly rose, extending his hands for the cuffs. "I surrender," he stated calmly. "I will not resist." As officers cuffed him, Elijah looked at Zion one last time. "My apologies, son, for everything." Zion stood up and walked to Elijah, ignoring the officer's protests. "I forgive you," he said simply, "and I will pray for you." Harris shook her head, observing the interaction. In 2 decades of law enforcement, she had never witnessed anything quite like it. "How did you get here, Mr. Jordan?" she inquired as Elijah was led upstairs. Michael looked at Zion, then back at the detective. "I can't quite articulate it. I was en route to an event and felt an inexplicable pull in this direction. Upon my arrival, I instinctively knew a child was in peril." Harris frowned. "Were you alone? How did you become aware of the abduction?" "I was unaware of any abduction," Michael confessed. "I simply had a profound sense that someone was in dire need of assistance." One of the paramedics was assessing Zion's condition, checking his vital signs and searching for any injuries. "He's dehydrated and undernourished, but otherwise appears to be in good health," the paramedic reported. "We'll take him to the hospital for a comprehensive examination." "I want to see my dad," Zion said. "Where's my dad?" Harris managed a smile, the first genuine one she had displayed in 2 days. "He's on his way. He'll meet you at the hospital." As they ascended the stairs, Zion held Michael's hand. "Thank you for coming to find me," he said. "I knew you wouldn't leave me alone." Michael paused midway up the staircase, gazing at the young boy who had exhibited more faith and courage than many adults he knew. "Thank you for calling me," he said. "I don't know how you did it, but thank you." Outside, the street was teeming with police cruisers, ambulances, and reporters who had already converged on the scene. Michael could see cameras pivoting in their direction the moment they emerged from the house. "Mr. Jordan," the reporters clamored, "how did you locate the child? What brought you to this location?" Michael disregarded their questions, focusing on ensuring Zion's safe passage to the ambulance. It was then that he spotted David Williams bolting down the street, having just disembarked from a police cruiser that had brought him to the location. "Zion!" David cried, tears streaming down his face. "Zion!" Father and son reunited in the middle of the street, David sweeping Zion into his arms and twirling him, both weeping and laughing simultaneously. "I knew you'd come, Daddy," Zion whispered, burying his face in his father's neck. "I knew you wouldn't abandon me." "Never, my son, not for anything." David glanced over Zion's shoulder at Michael, who stood a few feet away, observing the poignant reunion. "Thank you," David uttered, his voice thick with emotion. "I don't know how to adequately express my gratitude." Michael approached and placed a reassuring hand on David's shoulder. "Your son is a remarkable young man. He possesses a faith I've never before witnessed." Both of you do. Harris then joined the small group, still attempting to fully comprehend the astonishing events that had transpired. We'll require statements from all of you, she stated, but that can be deferred until tomorrow. For now, let's get Zion to the hospital to ensure his complete well-being. As Zion was being settled into the ambulance, he extended a hand toward Michael one last time. Mr. Jordan, would you be able to visit us once I'm discharged from the hospital? My father bakes the finest apple pie in Chicago. Michael smiled, clasping his small hand. It would be an honor, Zion. It would be an honor. 3 days later, at Chicago Children's Hospital, Zion was seated in his room's bed, clad in new pajamas a nurse had purchased for him. He seemed diminutive in the hospital bed, but his eyes gleamed with the same luminescence that had sustained his conviction during the 2 darkest days of his young life. David was seated in a chair beside the bed, a stack of letters and gifts from well-wishers adorning the table. The story had resonated nationwide, and individuals from every corner of the nation were dispatching messages of support and hope. Dad, please read that letter again, Zion requested, gesturing toward a pink envelope, the one from the lady in Texas. David retrieved the letter and began to read in a gentle tone. Dear Zion, your example has demonstrated to me that faith can indeed move mountains. May God bless you always. Detective Harris entered the room, bearing a hefty report and an expression of profound satisfaction. How are you feeling today, champ? She inquired, affectionately ruffling Zion's hair. Much better. The physicians have indicated I can return home tomorrow. Harris settled onto the edge of the bed. I have some updates regarding the case. Elijah Morrison is set to be charged with kidnapping, but owing to his ultimate cooperation and your collective testimony regarding his redemption, he will likely receive a more lenient sentence. Zion nodded earnestly. I hope he finds peace. He isn't an inherently bad person. He was simply deeply wounded. Harris shook her head, still impressed by the boy's remarkable maturity. You know the press will be hailing you as a hero? The child who brought Michael Jordan through prayer? Zion chuckled, a light, melodious sound. I'm no hero. I merely believed. God performed all the work. It was at that moment the room's door swung open once more, and Michael Jordan discreetly entered, carrying a small wrapped gift. I trust I'm not intruding, he said with a smile. Zion's face completely lit up as he attempted to sit more upright in the bed. Mr. Jordan, you came. I promised I would, and Michael Jordan always honors his commitments. Michael approached the bedside and presented the gift to Zion. Open it. With eager fingers, Zion tore open the wrapping paper. Inside was an official Chicago Bulls basketball, autographed not only by Michael Jordan, but by the entire current team. Wow, Zion whispered, rotating the ball in his small hands. That's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. Michael settled onto the edge of the bed, across from Harris. Zion, may I ask you something? Of course. How did you know? How could you have been so certain I would come? Zion clutched the ball to his chest and pondered for a moment. Do you recall what you said in the documentary? That it doesn't matter where you come from, but where you aspire to go. Michael nodded. Well, I've always wanted to reach a place where I could help others believe in miracles. And I knew you wanted to get there too. So when I prayed, I asked God to show you where I was, because I knew your heart yearned to help. Michael felt tears stinging his eyes. He had won 6 NBA championships, shattered records that seemed insurmountable, and become a global legend. Yet he had never felt as profoundly humbled as in that moment. You've taught me something, Zion. You reminded me that true greatness lies not in what we achieve for ourselves, but in what we accomplish for others. David cleared his throat, joining the conversation. Mr. Jordan, I don't know how to adequately express my gratitude. You saved my son. You saved our family. Michael shook his head. No, David. Zion saved himself. Through his faith, through his unwavering belief in the impossible. He merely used me as an instrument. Zion smiled, that radiant smile that had sustained his hope during his darkest hours. God uses people who are willing to listen. And you listened, Mr. Jordan. You heeded my heart's call, and you came. Michael remained silent for a moment, processing the child's profound words. You know what this signifies, don't you? He finally said. You'll have to keep believing in miracles, because now the entire world is watching, waiting to see what other impossibilities you will render possible. Zion chuckled, clutching the basketball tighter. I won't stop believing, Mr. Jordan. Never. Because now I know with certainty that God hears all prayers. He was merely waiting for the opportune moment to demonstrate that he can accomplish anything. As afternoon seamlessly transitioned into evening, Zion, David, Michael, and Harris conversed about faith, hope, and the power of belief. The narrative of those 2 days would evolve into a legend in Chicago, recounted and retold for generations. But for Zion, it wasn't a story about fame or public miracles. It was a story about a boy who believed when everyone said it was impossible, about a father who never gave up searching, about a wounded man who chose redemption, and about a hero who remembered that true greatness comes from serving others. 3 months later, Zion would sink his first basket on a basketball court at his neighborhood community center, with Michael Jordan observing from the stands. And when the ball swished cleanly through the net, Zion did not celebrate his own prowess. Instead, he looked up at the sky and whispered, "Thank you for teaching me that miracles are real." If this story touched your heart and you believe in the power of faith and miracles, don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Share this story with someone who needs to be reminded that it's never too late to believe in the impossible. And remember, no matter how dire the situation, there is always a light waiting to shine through it.